What do you make of the regime's astonishing, I mean, some would say shameful reluctance in not allowing aid to come in?
Well, Andrew, for decades now, the military regimes that have ruled Myanmar have sought to isolate themselves from much of the rest of the world, especially the Western world. And as a result of that, a key motif of isolationist countries, North Korea would be another good example, is paranoia. The regimes become paranoid about the outside world and about their own people and institutions. And after decades and generations of isolation, this paranoia becomes reality. Mix into that the widespread sanctions that so many other countries have imposed on Myanmar for so long, and you have a vicious cycle. The sanctions feed the paranoia and its behaviors prompt more and more severe sanctions, and that's what you have today. A regime so irrationally mistrustful of those countries that can help it the most that the regime's incapable of seeing these plane loads of aid that are on offer for what they really are, humanitarian aid.
Indeed, so you have this trickle of aid coming in and the Myanmarese dealing with it the best they can internally. But the state of the health system in Myanmar, I mean, could it even begin to cope with the kind of disaster that's unfolding there?
Well, from my knowledge of the healthcare system there back in the late 1990s, and I investigated it and reported on it, it can't provide adequate, proper care for its people at the best of times. The country's so poor, it's so isolated, it's so deprived of basic health necessities by the sanctions, that a decade ago Myanmar embraced so-called traditional medicine as the cornerstone of its health system. Traditional medicine is relatively easy to teach. The ingredients for its concoctions are locally grown and locally made, so it's not subject to the sanctions. But Western-trained doctors in the region who are familiar with Asia's traditional medicines cast grave doubts about the efficacy of much of what passes for traditional medicine in Myanmar these days. Andrew?
And looking at the size of this catastrophe, the UN's talking about perhaps 1.5 million people still homeless, and there's now the real threat of disease, the threat there's no clean water, there's no food. Could this be, as some analysts are now suggesting, a tipping point for the regime, that there could be a widespread move against them?
Well, I think, Andrew, when you look at the massive human toll that this cyclone has taken, when you look at the massive toll on food and on all aspects of infrastructure there, initially at least, I suspect the people's ability to rise up against the regime is weakened. This is a population that is hugely dependent on the regime at the best of times, and is especially so now. And remember, it's an isolated country. The junta controls the information. Many of us in the outside world would know more about what's happened in Myanmar in the past 6-7 days, about the extent of it and the severity of it, than many people in Myanmar. So I strongly suspect the junta's iron grip on the country is not about to loosen anytime soon.